In my last video, I showed you my first and second ponds. In this video, I will show you my third and current pond. I will explain the steps that I used to construct the pond from start to finish, including the placement of the pond, the excavation, finishing the hole, the installation of the underlayment at the liner, and into the filter system as well. I have also included a short video of the koi in the pond, as well as the ones that are currently in my collection. I hope you'll find it interesting. The first step was to outline exactly where the pond was to go and to remove any impediments such as the paving stones that you see in the photos so the dig could begin. Because this pond is entirely in ground and would be constructed using a rubber pond liner, I wanted to ensure that the surround was stable and would prevent any collapse depending on weather-related conditions. I also wanted to ensure that I had a stable base for the wall that I was planning to build around the pond to help deter predators and provide somewhere to sit as well. The first step to accomplish that was to dig out a trench outlining the shape of the pond in which a concrete collar would be created. This concrete collar would provide a stable surround for the pond and the soil, and also provide a stable and level base for the pond wall. Once the trench was completed, forms were put in place to contain the concrete, and that was followed up by the installation of steel reinforcing rods. Once that was done, the concrete was mixed and poured to give me the foundation that I was looking for. If I recall correctly, I ended up using approximately 150 66-pound bags of concrete to make my concrete collar. A view from the back of the house, an upstairs bedroom, gives you an idea of exactly where the pond was being positioned in the yard. The next step was the excavation, and to do this, because of the size of the pond, the depth that it was going to be dug, and the fact that the backyard is entirely made up of hard clay, a mini excavator was hired. Fortunately, my youngest son had experience on this type of equipment, so there was no need to hire an operator. Unfortunately, the machine did have its limitations as far as the reach was concerned, so a significant amount of hand digging was required. The machine did, however, get down to approximately 2/3 of the depth of the pond. The other downside with the machine is that it did not leave refined edges, and smoothing was required, as you will see in upcoming photos. And as it would seem with all pond builds that I have seen, the weather never cooperates fully, and issues arose with water in the hole. By the time all was said and done, I ended up having 44 cubic yards of soil removed from the yard. The most labor-intensive part of the build was the hand shaping using a pickaxe and a shovel. The shaping took almost 2 weeks to complete, as it was very labor-intensive with the yard being made of clay. Of course, added to that was the need to remove that soil, and the bins continued to fill. The next step was to excavate for the installation of the bottom drain and for the mid-water inlets to the pond. Once that was done, the pipework was installed and concreted into place. Once the concrete had cured, the bottom of the pond was leveled with a slight slope towards the drain. With the in-ground plumbing completed, it was time to install the underlayment before the liner. Now that the underlayment work was completed, it was time for the liner. The liner used for most pond builds in Canada is a 45 mil EPDM rubber pond liner. In the case of my pond, this liner weighed in at approximately 250 pounds, and it took myself, my son, and 3 of his friends to move it into place. Once the liner had been moved roughly into place, the opening for the bottom drain was prepared and a flange attached. From there, the remainder of the liner could be moved into its final position and the wrinkles smoothed out as much as possible. Of course, again, rain delays did not help in this process. After a few days of work, the liner was fitted around the inlets from the filter, and the pond was ready for water. In Oshawa, southern Ontario, Canada, where I live, regulations dictate that before the pond can be filled with water, it must be inspected by municipal bylaw officers to ensure that it has met all the criteria provided when the pond permit was issued. Once the inspection had been completed and the approval given, it was time for the water. Needless to say, with the pond being just over 5,000 gallons, this took many hours for the pond to fill. But during that time, I was able to work on the filtration system and getting that into place. The next step was the construction of the wall around the pond and the installation of the electric fence to protect the fish from predators. Of course, what would a koi pond be without koi? And like so many koi keepers out there, I continued to tweak the filter system and have plans in the works for even more changes to the filters this year. Those of you who have seen my December update video will recall that I bring my koi indoors for the winter, and despite having ample room in the outdoor pond for a large collection of koi, the indoor one, although 2,000 gallons, is considerably smaller than my outdoor pond, and I decided to downsize my collection to give them a much more comfortable home during the winter months. I decided to move on a number of koi. Some were sold, some were given away to friends and for their ponds, leaving me with 11 in total. I also supplemented my filtration system by adding 2 easy pods. The following short video clip will show you the ones that I still have in my collection. I have always made it a practice each year to measure my koi as I move them from indoors to outdoors to see how the growth has come throughout the season. In 2021, however, due to significant health issues, my koi remained indoors for the entire season, and measurements were not taken. Hopefully this year, 2022, things will be better and I'll be able to measure as I move them outside as always. The following photos, with the measurements indicated for each fish, were taken approximately 2 years ago, so I know they have grown somewhat since then. With winter in Canada comes snow, ice, and sub-zero temperatures, making the pond inaccessible for the winter months. With that in mind, I constructed an indoor pond in which to house the koi, keeping them safe in the winter and allowing me the opportunity to interact with them until pond season comes back once again. My indoor, or my winter pond as I call it, I constructed out of 2x6s, 6x6s, and half-inch plywood with underlayment and a rubber pond liner. The volume of the pond is approximately 2,000 gallons based on the water level that I maintain it at, and it is 10 feet by 8 feet and 4 feet deep, and is filtered by a homemade or DIY filter system. The walls of the pond were constructed similar to a stud wall in a house. Instead of using 2x4s, however, I used 2x6s for the strength necessary to support the weight of the water. The 2x6 uprights are spaced 1 foot apart and are secured to a 2x6 top and bottom rail. The walls were constructed in segments and then secured to vertical 6x6s for added strength in the middle and in the corners. The bottom rails on all sides are then secured to the concrete floor with lag bolts. Once the wall structure was completed, and in place, half-inch plywood sheets were inserted to provide a solid base for the pond liner. The walls and floor of the pond were then covered in an underlayment material to protect the liner from any errant slivers or imperfections in the concrete floor on which the pond sits. As you can see from the accompanying photo, I did have some assistance during the underlayment install from my trusty canine companions Angus and Cinnabon. With the underlayment installation complete, the liner was then installed and the corners folded and taped to give a secure and tidy look to the liner. To ensure that the koi would remain safely in the pond, I constructed a 1-foot high screen on two sides as well as the front. The screen on the front is hinged and folds down for easy access to the pond. The net divider that you see in the final pond photo is to separate the koi from my two sturgeon. Although they can comfortably live together, the sturgeon food is very appealing to the koi, and if the separation is not in place, the koi will eat all of the food before the sturgeon can access it. And a quick look at the koi in the indoor pond, enjoying the balmy 15 degrees Celsius water. Definitely chilly, but certainly better than freezing their little fishy butts off outdoors in an ice-covered pond. Before I end this video, I just want to show you a very unique, one-of-a-kind koi, a Tancho Kahaku made entirely out of marzipan. This unique koi was based on the photo on the cover of a Koi Carp magazine and was crafted by my youngest son. Please note the details on the koi, the fins, the scales, right down to the barbels. This is my first ever Tancho Kahaku, but it is more comfortable out of the pond than in. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed the video and what you have seen. If you have not already done so, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, as there's much more to come in the upcoming months. Please also feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you.